The rope was already tied. The sun beat down hot over the town of Dry Ridge, casting long, unmerciful shadows across the rough-hewn gallows in the square. Dust swirled in lazy circles, but the people gathered were anything but still. Their voices buzzed with accusation, their eyes narrowed with certainty. She stood there barefoot, wrists bound, a smear of dried blood on her temple, not her own. Her name was Annabel Lee, and the people around her had decided she was guilty. No judge, no trial, just rumors and fear. "She poisoned him," someone shouted from the crowd. "She stole from the McGrath ranch. No decent woman runs alone through the night in men's trousers." The sheriff, a man too easily swayed by whiskey and louder voices, watched from beneath the brim of his hat, saying nothing. His silence was an answer in itself. Annabel didn't cry. She didn't plead. Her lips were cracked, her throat raw, but she stood tall, chin lifted, even as the noose was lowered. And then a voice, low, steady. "I wouldn't do that." It came from the edge of the square. A man stepped forward. He wasn't from the town. That much was clear from his moccasins, the braid over his shoulder, and the calm certainty in his gaze. He wore no badge, carried no rifle, and still the crowd moved aside. His name was Takwali, though few in Dry Ridge had ever dared say it. He was Cherokee, a man of few words, known for riding alone and for settling matters with precision when diplomacy failed. The sheriff squinted. "You got no business here." Takwali didn't answer him. He looked only at Annabel. Her breath caught. Something in his face wasn't just calm. It was truth. "She didn't kill that man," he said. "I saw who did." The crowd murmured. The sheriff shifted his weight. "And why should we believe you?" Takwali stepped forward slowly. "Because I dragged the body out of the river myself. The marks on his neck weren't from poison. They were from rage. The kind that doesn't come from a woman running for her life." A long silence. Then a voice from the back, skeptical. "And what do you want, Cherokee?" Takwali looked at Annabel again. "Justice," he said simply. "And if your law won't give it, I will take her with me. She'll be safer outside your fences." Annabel could barely process the words, but when he reached for the rope, cutting it loose, her knees nearly buckled. He caught her, not with force, but with care. By nightfall, they were gone, just dust where gallows once stood, and a story already growing among the townsfolk of a girl they thought was guilty and a warrior who walked into a town alone and walked out with her life in his hands. The sun dipped low behind the pines, casting the sky in amber and rose as Takwali led Annabel along a narrow trail beyond Dry Ridge. Neither of them spoke. Her wrists still burned where the rope had rubbed raw. Her lips trembled from thirst and confusion, but her pride kept her spine straight. Still, she couldn't stop glancing at the man ahead of her, the stranger who'd stopped the hanging with fewer words than most men used to order a drink. Who was he? They camped near a stream that night, under tall trees and wide silence. Takwali started a small fire with practiced ease, then handed her a tin cup filled with clear water. "Drink." Annabel hesitated. "Don't worry," he said simply, "no poison." She took the cup with shaking hands and drank deeply. The water felt cold and alive, as if it were clearing away days of fear. When she looked at him again, he was already setting out a piece of dried meat and some flatbread. He didn't speak until she did. Why'd you help me?" Takwali didn't look up from the fire. "Because you didn't ask anyone to." Annabel frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "It does to me." She slept that night wrapped in a blanket he'd lent her, curled near the fire, the stars above spinning in silent witness. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, her breath slowed. She wasn't safe. Not yet. But she was no longer at the mercy of people who wanted her dead just to quiet their own guilt. In the morning, Annabel woke to the smell of pine smoke and the sound of Takwali sharpening a blade on stone. His motions were slow, focused. Every movement had purpose. "You really saw who did it?" she asked as she rubbed her eyes. He nodded. "Two men, drunk, arguing with the man who ended up dead. They didn't see me, but I saw them. They threw him in the river like he was trash." Annabel's throat tightened. "And they blamed me. Because it was easier." She looked down at her hands. "I don't even know how I got there. I woke up in that barn with blood on my dress and voices shouting. Everything moved so fast." Takwali paused. "Sometimes when people are afraid, they find someone to punish. Not someone who's guilty, just someone weaker." His eyes met hers. "You survived. That already makes you stronger than they wanted you to be." Later that day, they crossed into open country. Hills rolled like waves, and the wind moved through the grass in soft, sweeping hushes. Annabel walked beside Takwali now, no longer behind him. When the sun reached its peak, they stopped to rest. She sat on a rock, chewing jerky, staring into the wide, wordless sky. "I don't know where to go," she said finally. "You don't have to know yet," Takwali replied. "First you heal, then you choose." She looked at him, voice barely a whisper. "And you? Where do you go?" He thought for a long moment, then said, "Where I'm needed." That night she watched him across the fire, quiet, patient, steady. A man who had nothing to gain from saving her, but did anyway. And for the first time in her life, Annabel wondered, could there be a place in this world where she was more than someone to survive? Could she belong? Could she be loved? 3 days had passed since Takwali cut the rope. 3 days since the town of Dry Ridge tried to erase a woman with whispers and a noose. And now, in the wide spaces beyond fences and blame, Annabel Lee was beginning to remember who she was before the fear. They traveled westward at a slow, steady pace, avoiding roads, following streams and animal trails instead. Takwali seemed to know the land like it spoke to him. When they reached a steep ravine or sudden change in weather, he adjusted without pause. She had never known someone so quiet, and yet so sure. Annabel had always thought silence meant absence, but with him it felt like strength. One morning, she found Takwali kneeling by the river, washing his hands and humming a song in Cherokee. The melody was soft, sorrowful maybe, but full of something deeper. Memory. She waited until he finished before speaking. "You always travel alone?" He glanced up. "Most times." She took a seat nearby on the grass. "You ever want something else?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I wanted peace. For a long time I thought that meant distance." "And now?" He looked at her, and this time he didn't look away. "Now I'm not so sure." That day a storm caught them in open country. Heavy clouds rolled in fast, and thunder cracked like musket fire. They took shelter beneath a rock ledge, the horses tied and calm, The two of them pressed close as rain sheeted down just beyond reach. Annabel's hair clung to her cheeks, and her breath was quick, not from fear of the storm, but from the closeness of him. She wasn't used to someone making space for her without expecting something in return. She broke the silence. "I never had anyone save me before." Takwali met her eyes. "You saved yourself. I just made it possible." Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to do with kindness that asks for nothing." He held her gaze. "Then let it teach you something new." That night the storm passed. The fire crackled again. The stars blinked shyly from behind breaking clouds. Annabel lay wrapped in her blanket, but sleep didn't come. "Do you believe people can be new again?" she asked softly. Takwali replied without hesitation. "Yes, but only if they let go of the lies others made them wear." She was quiet for a while, then whispered, "I want to." He turned his head toward her, voice low. "Then start with this. You are not what they said you were. You never were." And just like that, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but inside her, beneath the bruises, beyond the shame, a crack of light opened. Hope. By the 7th day on the trail, Annabel stopped counting the miles behind her. The past still lived in her, yes, but it no longer owned her. She rode with a straighter spine now, spoke without asking permission, laughed softly when a sparrow landed on her saddle horn and stayed there, as if even the smallest creature knew she was no longer running. They came upon a valley that stretched wide and green beneath a sky like polished glass. Buffalo grass swayed in slow waves, and cottonwoods lined the river that cut through its middle. Takwali pulled his horse to a stop. "This is it," he said quietly. Annabel looked around. "It's beautiful." "It was my mother's land," he said, "before the treaty forced us to move east. But I still come here when I need to remember who I am." She dismounted slowly, feeling the wind kiss her face. "It feels like it remembers you too." They made camp beneath a thicket of cedar trees. The ground was soft and cool, and the scent of sage filled the air. That evening they didn't speak much, but the silence between them was no longer guarded. It was full of presence, of trust. Annabel sat by the fire, legs tucked beneath her, watching Takwali carve a small figure out of bone. "Is that for someone?" she asked. He nodded. "For a girl in the next village. Her mother's ill. I leave it at their lodge when I pass through. It helps her sleep." Annabel tilted her head. "You do that and never say a word?" "There's power in being known without being seen." She stared at him for a long time. "You could have left me in Dry Ridge. Let them do what they planned. No one would have stopped you." Takwali met her gaze. No one should have to be saved from justice, but what they had wasn't justice. She didn't say anything more. But when she lay down that night under the stars, the ache in her chest wasn't fear or shame anymore. It was longing for more of the peace he carried with him, and maybe one day to carry a little of it herself. The next morning she helped gather kindling. Her hands were blistered, but she welcomed it. She was earning her place, not begging for it. As they packed their things, she turned to him. "Where are we going next?" Takwali looked at her gently. "Where you want to go." Her brow furrowed. "No one's ever asked me that." "Well," he said, adjusting his saddle, "you're not no one, and it's time you stopped letting other people decide what you are." Annabel mounted her horse slowly. Her face turned to the wide horizon, and for the first time in her life she whispered the answer back, not to him, but to herself. Somewhere I can belong. Takwali's quiet reply came like steady thunder. Then I'll ride beside you until you do. A week later, the hills opened to a quiet settlement nestled along a stream. It wasn't a town marked by greed or gallows. No loud saloon, no sheriff's star, just a scattering of cabins, a smokehouse, a garden shaded by cottonwoods, and the sound of children's laughter drifting between the trees. "This is Willow Hollow," Takwali said as they rode down the slope. "Not many know of it." Annabelle looked around. "It's peaceful." "It's not perfect," he replied, "but they don't ask where you came from, only what kind of person you are when you arrive." That, to Annabelle, felt like grace. They were welcomed with warmth and few questions. Takwali was known here, trusted. He helped a man repair his roof before he even unsaddled his horse. Annabelle watched, her fingers clenching and unclenching at her sides. She still didn't know how to belong, but she wanted to learn. By the second day, she was asked to help tend to the herb garden. By the third, she was teaching 2 little girls how to sew small cloth dolls. By the fourth, someone left a jar of honey outside her door. And by the fifth, she no longer felt like a shadow. Takwali didn't hover, he didn't press, but he was always near. In the evenings, he carved. Sometimes birds, sometimes feathers, sometimes nothing at all. Just shapes and motion, as if his hands spoke when words could not. One night, as the fire crackled low and the stars blanketed the clearing, Annabelle sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees. "I don't know how to say thank you for what you've done," she said. "You don't have to." "But I want to," she added. He turned slightly, his voice calm. "Then live, fully, without shame. That's more thanks than I'll ever need." The next morning, she walked alone down to the stream. The water was cool and clear, and she caught her reflection in it. Sun-touched skin, wind-tangled hair, eyes no longer dull. She stared, then whispered, "I'm still here." Behind her, footsteps. "Takwali." "You are," he said quietly, and more than before. Later that day, the village elder, a woman with sharp eyes and a gentle voice, asked to speak with Annabelle privately. "You carry sorrow," the woman said, "but not like a wound, more like a lesson." Annabelle nodded. "I used to think I was cursed, and now I think I was broken, but not beyond repair." The woman smiled. "That is where true strength lives." That night, Takwali handed her a new carving. It was a woman, small, sturdy, standing tall. Around her feet, broken rope. Annabelle took it with both hands, lips trembling. "What is she called?" Takwali's reply was steady. "Free." The seasons began to shift. Late summer softened the earth beneath Willow Hollow. The nights turned cooler, and golden light stretched longer in the evenings. Children chased dragonflies. Smoke curled gently from the cook fires, and with every passing day, Annabelle's silence turned into steadiness. She helped the healer sort herbs. She washed linens by the stream. She shared stories with the women who once looked at her like a guest, but now called her sister. Takwali, too, had changed, but not in ways that anyone else might notice. He still rose before sunrise, still worked quietly, carved by firelight, moved like wind over stone. But now his eyes lingered on Annabelle longer than they used to. His words, rare as ever, were slower, measured, gentle. One evening, as they gathered wood together, he handed her a small pouch. "What's this?" she asked. "Something you should have." Inside was a simple necklace, leather cord with 3 beads, one red, one white, one made of river stone. "Your colors," he said. "Your journey." She blinked. "Why give this to me?" He looked at her, unflinching. "Because it's time you wore something that chose you, not something others forced on you." That night, she wore the necklace to the fire circle. No one commented, but they all noticed. A week later, a traveler arrived in Willow Hollow, dusty, nervous, eyes darting. He asked for water, then asked about a woman who fit Annabelle's description. Takwali stood beside him as he drank. "Who wants to know?" he asked. The man cleared his throat. "I came from Dry Ridge. Word got around that the girl wasn't guilty after all. Some folks back there, they've been asking questions." Takwali's jaw tensed. Too late for questions. "I don't want trouble," the man muttered. "Then don't bring it here." The message was clear. The man left by morning. When Annabelle heard, she sat quietly by the stream for a long time. "I thought I wanted to be proven innocent," she said when Takwali found her. "But now I realize I don't need them to clear my name. I just want to stop carrying their story." Takwali crouched beside her. "Then carry your own." She looked at him. "What if it's unfinished?" He smiled just a little. The kind of smile that meant something deep and quiet had shifted. Good stories always are. That night, as stars broke open across the dark, Annabelle spoke softly by the fire. "I want to stay." Takwali said nothing for a moment. Then stay. "With you," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. His answer was simple, always. And there, in the silence between flame and sky, something invisible became certain. They were no longer 2 people running from pain. They were 2 souls walking toward something whole, together. By the time the leaves began to shift from green to gold, Annabelle no longer walked like someone afraid of being seen. She stood taller now, spoke without flinching. Her smile came easier, and sometimes, when no one was looking, she sang softly to herself, old songs from her childhood, ones she thought had been buried under fear. But nothing had bloomed more quietly or powerfully than what she and Takwali were building between them. Not a whirlwind, not a fever, something steadier, like a river, constant, deep, and moving without needing to rush. One evening, they walked together beyond the village, into the open field where the tall grass danced like waves. The sun was low, casting long shadows. Takwali stopped near a ring of standing stones. "I used to come here when I was young," he said, "before I understood the difference between silence and loneliness." Annabelle turned to him. "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I know silence can be a kind of prayer." She stepped closer. "Then I've been praying longer than I realized." They sat together in the grass, her head on his shoulder, watching the clouds shift above them. "I used to think love had to look like a rescue," she whispered. "Loud, sudden, dramatic." He was quiet, then said, "That's not love, that's a fire. Beautiful, but gone too fast." She looked up at him. "And this?" He met her gaze, hand brushing her cheek. "This is something that stays." That night, as a warm wind rustled the lodge, Takwali reached into a carved wooden box by the hearth and brought out something wrapped in soft deerskin. He placed it in her hands. Inside was a circle of woven silvergrass, twined with thin strands of turquoise. "I made it during the storm," he said, "when you were still healing." Her eyes filled with tears. "What is it?" In our tradition, it's not a ring. It's a path, an offering. You don't wear it, you accept it. Her voice trembled. And if I do? He stepped closer. Then we walk forward, as one. Annabel looked at the circle, then at the man who had taught her, without forcing, that love does not take, it invites. I accept, she said, and this time, when he leaned forward to kiss her, it wasn't quiet. It was everything. That night, no one in the village said a word, but in every firelight glow, in every knowing smile, the message was clear. The girl they tried to hang had become a woman loved not for being saved, but for surviving, standing, and choosing to live again. The morning after their quiet vow, the air felt different. Not dramatic, not heavy, just still, like the world had taken a breath and finally settled into place. Annabel woke to the smell of cedar and the sound of Takwali grinding corn outside the lodge. She watched him through the open flap, barefoot, steady, sun touching his shoulders. Her chest ached in a way that wasn't pain. It was peace, and she was still getting used to it. Later that day, she walked through Willow Hollow with the woven silvergrass band tucked in her palm. A few children waved as she passed. The healer offered her a basket of dried apples. No one spoke of what had changed between her and Takwali the night before, but everyone seemed to know. Respect was never loud here. It was lived. By late afternoon, she stood at the stream with Wichapi, helping her braid her long black hair. "You look different," the girl said matter-of-factly. Annabel smiled. "Do I?" "You're lighter, like when birds know winter is far away." Annabel laughed softly. "Maybe that's because I stopped carrying a story that didn't belong to me." Wichapi squinted up at her. "You gonna stay forever?" The question hit deeper than she expected, and her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." That evening, Takwali brought her a new carving. 2 small birds, carved side by side, wings nearly touching. She ran her fingers over them. "What kind are they?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter." "Why not?" "Because they chose to fly the same direction." The next few weeks passed like sunlight through leaves, gentle, golden, and full of quiet purpose. Annabel planted herbs with Najing. She stitched winter blankets with the elder women. At night, she and Takwali shared meals and silence, sometimes interrupted only by firelight and the sound of his carving. She didn't feel rescued. She felt reborn. One night, as they lay beneath a sky dusted with stars, she turned to him. "Do you ever think about that day in Dry Ridge?" He was silent a moment, then, "Yes, but not the rope, not the fear. I think about your eyes. You looked around like you were already gone, and then you saw me." She nodded, tears quietly rising. "You were the only face that didn't look like a verdict." "You didn't need a savior," he said. "You needed someone to believe you were worth saving." Annabel reached for his hand. "And now?" He turned to her fully. "Now I see a woman who doesn't need a rescuer, just a man who walks beside her and never lets go." And beneath the stars, she made him a vow, not with ceremony, not with words, but with the simple act of falling asleep beside him in a place where fear no longer lived. She had survived the rope. Now she was learning to thrive in the arms of something she never thought she'd deserve, a love she chose. By the first frost, Willow Hollow was preparing for winter. Blankets were traded, dried meat was stored, smokehouses stayed busy, and laughter echoed like songbirds through cold mornings. Annabel helped every day. her hands never idle, kneading dough, stringing herbs, or shaping soft leather into moccasins. But something had shifted inside her that had nothing to do with the seasons. She no longer felt like a woman who had escaped a town. She felt like a woman who had chosen a life. One afternoon, Takwali found her kneeling in the garden, tugging the last of the roots from the soil. "Come," he said simply. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Where to?" He smiled, not with his lips, but with his eyes. "To a place only I've seen." They rode high into the hills where the wind was sharper and the sky seemed closer. At the top of a ridge, he dismounted and offered her his hand. She took it, breathless, not from the climb, but from what stretched below. A wide glen, a bend in the river, a cluster of trees just beginning to turn gold. "This is where I'll build," he said, "if you want it." Annabel turned slowly. "Build?" He nodded. "A home, not just a roof, a place that belongs to us. No history we didn't choose, no names carved by someone else's hands." Tears stung her eyes. "You're sure?" "I've never been more." She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him. "I used to think I'd never belong anywhere," she whispered. "But this place, this life—" "You don't belong to it," he murmured. "You shape it." They returned to the village that night in silence, hearts full, and by morning Takwali began to gather timber. Not many asked questions, but the village helped, because when love is quiet and strong, everyone sees it, even if no one says it out loud. Weeks passed. The first snow fell soft as ash, and on a morning painted silver with frost, Takwali took Annabel's hand and led her to the ridge once more, where a lodge now stood, modest, new, built with care. "This is yours," he said. "Ours," she corrected. Then she placed the small bird carving he'd once given her above the door frame. "This is where the past ends," she whispered, "and something whole begins." That night, with firelight glowing inside their new home and snow drifting softly beyond the window, Annabel sat beside the man who had never raised his voice, never made demands, only made room. "I was supposed to die with a rope around my neck," she said. Takwali placed his hand gently over hers. "But you lived with love instead." And in that quiet lodge, on a winter night far from the town that tried to bury her, Annabel Lee, once broken, once hunted, closed her eyes and whispered a final vow. "No one will ever decide my worth again." Winter deepened across the valley. Snow piled high on rooftops. Smoke curled steadily from every chimney. The laughter of children echoed through frosted pines, and firelight danced in windows like soft heartbeat rhythms. Life in Willow Hollow slowed, but it never stopped. Inside the small lodge on the ridge, Annabel and Takwali found a rhythm all their own, simple, warm, quiet, and unshakably theirs. Each morning, Annabel rose before the sun, wrapped in the thick shawl Najing had gifted her. She boiled water, sorted herbs, and hummed softly, old hymns, but no longer filled with sorrow. Now they were lullabies of healing. Takwali returned each day with fresh game or wood or, on some mornings, nothing but stories carried on the wind. He told her of hawk feathers found at the base of cedar trees or bear tracks in the snow, not in many words, just enough. They didn't need conversation to feel close. Silence between them was not empty, it was sacred. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Annabel sat by the fire, weaving a small doll from corn husks. She glanced at Takwali, who carved in the corner, focused but calm. "I think I want to write a letter," she said suddenly. He looked up. "To who?" She hesitated. "To no one. To myself, maybe. To the girl I was before Dry Ridge." He gave a small nod. "Then write it. Let her see how far you've come." And so she did. "Dear Annabel, you were not wrong for running. You were not weak for trembling. You were not broken for surviving. They tried to take your voice, but look at you now, loved, standing, full of stories, still unwritten." She tucked the letter away in a carved box. Not because she needed to send it, but because she no longer needed to be afraid of remembering. Spring came slowly that year. The first shoots of green peeked through the snow like shy promises. Birds returned, the stream ran faster, and with it came a new rhythm, one marked by laughter, long walks, and quiet joy. One morning, as they gathered with the village near the central fire, Najing placed a hand on Annabel's belly with a knowing look. Annabel blinked, then laughed, free, unguarded, full of wonder. She and Takwali were building a family. The rope hadn't broken her. It had tried. The world had tried to label her, bury her, silence her. But it was the hand of a man who listened, not shouted, that reached her first. A man who believed her story didn't end in pain. A man who stood in the firelight now, looking at her not as someone he saved, but as someone he chose. And in the lodge where the snow once whispered against the roof and the wind hummed outside like a memory, two souls rested side by side, not fleeing, not surviving, but rooted in love, in peace, in a life no one could hang, shame, or erase.